that they're out there while we're in here, year out, year in, year wanting everything, everything, everything other men aspire to. What another's entitled to, we're entitled to too. It's a curious, dangerous malady we are all afflicted with. We want everything, everything, just like other men do. Papa has taught us there's a crack in the wall.
Your father.
He taught us it's up to us all to probe and pick and push until one day that wall gives way and we have everything, everything, just like other men do. In my own lifetime, I want to see our efforts worse. In my own lifetime, I want to see the walls come down and then I'll rest. This Moses wants to see the promised land in my own lifetime.
It's a party.
Good evening, everyone. This is the 25th presentation in the York Theatre Company's Show and Tell series, which revisits notable York productions and brings the people who created them back together for a virtual reunion. A friendly little pandemic tried to interrupt the York's 50th anniversary celebration, which actually began over 2 years ago. But we realized that this series is a great way to continue marking that milestone. We're delighted to share these shows and the people who created them with you. We've celebrated lots of shows, from Anyone Can Whistle to Beggar's Holiday. You can find all of these programs on the York Theatre's YouTube channel. Subscribing to our channel costs nothing and does great things for both of us. You'll be able to access all of our events simply and easily, and it helps build the York Theatre's following in today's all-important social media world. If COVID weren't enough, on January 4th, a Lexington Avenue water main break devastated much of our space, our archives, our equipment, and our lives. We've vacated the space for the time being. When and if we return remains to be seen. The generosity of patrons over these months has been extraordinary. If you haven't contributed to our GoFundMe campaign, you may do so here. We have lots in store for you during the new year as we revisit other shows in this series, such as After the Fair, A Doll's Life, Texas in Paris, and more. Various other events, many of them virtual, will be happening throughout the coming months. Our new program, In the Pipeline, in which we talk to writers about their works and development, will continue. Remember that throughout tonight's program, you can type questions or comments into the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to answer them when we find time. The show we are celebrating tonight, Rothschild Sons by Sheldon Harnick, Gerry and Sherman Yellen, was presented in 2015 in a co-production with Arnold Mittelman and the National Jewish Theatre Foundation. We've reunited some members of the York's cast and creative team, plus representatives from the 2018 London production and some special guests for tonight's discussion. But first, I'd like you to meet my cohorts and co-hosts, our Associate Artistic Director and a wonderfully talented director and choreographer, Gerry McIntyre, and my other pandemic partner, Charles Wright, our resident theater historian. Charles is writing a book about the first 50 years of the York Theatre Company, and he also happens to be the co-president of the Drama Desk. Charles?
Yes, The Rothschilds. It was originally a big Broadway musical from 1970. It was the final Broadway collaboration of Sheldon Harnick and Gerry, and it ran for 507 performances, and it had 9 Tony nominations. It was a triumph for Hal Linden, who played the paterfamilias Meyer Rothschild. and who received a Tony. The other Tony win was Keane Curtis as Best Featured Actor. He played all the male European aristocrats in the story. It was produced by Lester Osterman and Hilliard Elkins. Hilliard Elkins, the man who brought us O Calcutta. And the show is based on an extremely successful family biography called The Rothschilds. The Broadway show was called The Rothschilds. The York production was, which we'll get to in a few minutes, is Rothschild and Sons. Morton's book was published in 1962. It had a tremendous success in popular paperback. By 1964, when theatergoers were seeing Fiddler on the Roof, many of them were also reading The Rothschilds. So Fiddler on the Roof, a story about a Jewish paterfamilias with 5 daughters, and was comparable in many ways to its successor, The Rothschilds, about a Jewish paterfamilias who had 5 sons. The show had a revival in New York in 1990 at the American Jewish Theater on West 26th Street. That was directed by Lonnie Price and featured Mike Burston as Meyer and Robert Cuccioli as middle son Nathan. That show moved to Circle in the Square downtown for a commercial run. It's interesting, the evolution of this material from a Broadway show with a cast of 40 to an off-Broadway revival with a cast of 16 to a shorter, streamlined version, Rothschild and Sons, with a cast of 11. But we've got a tape with some historical material from people who know more about this than I do. So could we roll that tape?
All of my shows have special meaning, but this perhaps has an unusually special meaning because both Sherman Yellen, who wrote the libretto, and I, and our director, Jeffrey Moss, we feel that this really has a statement to make about acceptance of minorities. And Bob Cuccioli played the son Nathan, who is perhaps the most important of the 5 Rothschild sons. And in this version, he's playing his own papa.
I wrote a play called Do Gods for Lovers. I was a young playwright, and it was submitted to Hilliard Elkins. He had tried every famous writer and found them wanting in terms of the adaptation of The Rothschilds. And he read this. It was a history play. And he said, would I like to try it? And I said, sure. And I did. And they sent it to Gerry and Sheldon Harnick, who had turned down all other versions of it. And they liked it enough to want to collaborate and to do the musical. And that's how we began.
It's a love story in many ways. It's a story about a family, about any family that's locked in or locked out.
Pink is for Frankfurt, lavender is London, orange is Bohemia, Copenhagen's grey. Here lies all Europe, colorful and peaceful. Wouldn't life be pleasant if it were this way?
Shoulders back, every head held high, for at last we're underway. Founders of the famous financial firm, Rothschild and Sons. Jaws will drop when the world finds out what a step we took today. Muhammad's favorite banking house, Rothschild and Sons. Rothschild and Sons.
wrote this is a totally different Rothschilds than what was done before. The script is very different. I've always had a very close bond to family, and that's what Meyer's all about.
Gudula is Meyer Rothschild's wife, and we actually age 50 years in this show. So we started age 18 when we first get married in Frankfurt, Germany, and we end up about 65 years old. I think there's a real message in this about that, about what are you willing to sacrifice in order to achieve your final goal.
Wonderful historical background in that snippet. That's actually posted on the York website. It gives a lot of background from all sorts of people that allows us to end this conversation right now. Thank you very much for tuning. Never mind. Why don't we go around and hear from everyone on our panel tonight? And perhaps starting with Arnold Mittelman, our associate producer and the head of the National Jewish Theater Foundation. Where are you and what are you up to? And then we'll get into the history of the show later down the road.
Jim, I'm sitting in my home in Coral Gables, Florida, and I've been basically here confined by the pandemic, except for certain kinds of necessity trips that I've taken for various reasons, business and mostly family related. And it's been rather a challenging time to understand the reality of what we do in the theater and the live presence of it that makes it so vital and important, and have that taken away. I retreated into another world of mine and wound up publishing 2 different books that have now been released, that have been essential parts of the other work I've done with the National Jewish Theater Foundation. So it did give me a chance to go into those and finish them up and get them published.
Wonderful, wonderful. Jeffrey B. Moss, our esteemed director and director of several shows at York over the years. Where are you and what are you up to?
Well, I'm in New York, but I have to say, almost embarrassed, but happy to say this. I've just opened a production of A Chorus Line in Boca Raton, Florida, at the Wick Theater. We opened over the weekend.
And?
Well, it's successful. Everybody's healthy. Everybody's safe. Everybody's vaccinated. And it was an amazing experience to go back to rehearsal. The first day was just amazing. All I could do was count 1, 2, 3 and go. It was thrilling. And before that, like everybody else, I was trying to figure out what's next.
And is there a particular memory from Rothschild and Sons? I mean, you've had many experiences with this show in over several productions.
Chris Williams, you were there. This memory, you know what I'm going to say. This is a Sheldon Harnick memory. We were in San Diego at North Coast Rep, the very beginning of Rothschilds and Sons. We were putting together this workshop production, and we had just done the first table read for Sheldon. And in the course of not too long into the show, Sheldon objected to something that was going on, strongly, as only Sheldon Harnick can, for what he thought was good reason. And he had some very strong things to say, and he said them very strongly, and I decided we needed to take a break. So I said to the stage manager, let's take a break. And the entire company filed out of this rehearsal room, which was on the first floor in what had been a storefront, I believe. And Sheldon and I went on to finish our conversation, which was very animated. There were a lot of hands and a lot of speaking. And actually, Sheldon started to tell me a very funny story. He realized we were at a point where we had gone past, the point of no return. And I then turned around and realized the entire cast was looking through the glass windows of this rehearsal space, which had been a store. They were all watching us. Right, Chris?
Yes, it was very entertaining. We were like, oh my gosh.
Right, what's going on in there? Which one is going to be alive? And
Who's going to hit who?
But of course, as with Sheldon, after he made his point, we hugged each other. It was fine, but we did it with an audience. I think that was my first and still one of my favorite memories of Rothschilds and Sons. We really became a family there.
Let's go to the
Gerry.
music supervisor from the New York production, Joe Church.
I'm actually in Fort Lauderdale. I still live in New York, but New York doesn't have a lot to offer right now. So we've been escaping to warmer climes as much as possible, and we found a little house that we love. So that's where we are. And I'm still teaching at NYU. That hasn't stopped. It's just all remote, and I'm really sick of Zoom. Writing a lot of songs. As you guys know, or some of you know, I did a little collaboration with Sheldon Harnick on an old song of his called "The Man with the Sign," and we made a little video of that, and that's up on my YouTube channel if you want to give it a look. A wonderful, amazing lyric to John Philip Sousa's "The Stars and Stripes Forever," and we had a little Amazing Grace reunion, and brought in Josh Young and Aaron Mackey to sing it, and along with Eddie Cooper, Chuck Cooper's son, and it was a wonderful experience making a recording remotely during the pandemic, but that was fun. So I'm writing a lot of songs. Stuff is still going. My daughter's engaged and she moved back to New York City, which I'm very happy about. And other than that, I'm just trying to enjoy myself as best I can. I'm still waiting for a show that was going to be produced at the York Theater called Pants, the Jimmy Pants musical, which Jim has been a champion of, thankfully, and the theater has been a champion of. And we're very excited about the show, and we're kind of patiently waiting for when we can resume. We were on a fast track, but of course we were derailed like everybody else was.
But it will happen. We have faith.
It will happen, and I believe in that show, and I'm sure you'll all enjoy it when it happens. It's a lot of fun.
It's sad that it's such a downer. It's not humorous in the least. And
I think I'm committed to writing comedy for the rest of my life. When the pandemic started, I started trying to organize a bunch of songwriters to write sort of satirical material times, and they all said, "No, I want to write deep, empathic songs about COVID and things like that." And I said, "No, nobody wants to hear about that stuff. We don't want sad songs. We want happy stuff." So I've been writing comedy songs. That's what I've been writing. Almost everything is light and fun.
Great. Jeffrey Klitz, who is the music director for the York production. Where are you? And catch us up with what you've been up to and maybe a favorite memory.
I'm still here. We're still here. My family we're all here in the suburbs on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Still hunkered down for over the last year, like everybody else, and grateful to have our health and be safe and be well. I've been doing the same thing that, fortunately, through all this time, I've been able to do what I do because of a bunch of projects that just kept going, mostly through, as Joe alluded to, like remote recording. It became something that we just made happen. A couple of projects. One is someone who has written a musical and has to be able to arrange and orchestrate and produce the cast album. And then collaboration with Joanna Gleason for a show that she wrote. It was a one-woman show with 7 other people on stage. And so that we did out in New York and did out in LA. And then we're now mixing the LA performances, the live performances. So all of that has been great. And a group a vocal ensemble I started in the last few years, Brooklyn Harmonics. Go to YouTube, Brooklyn Harmonics. We've been remote recording in the last year, and there have been like a half dozen tunes and a couple more imminent on the way. 8 vocalists, 5 rhythm section and horns. So it's a kind of a great sound and a timely project. The tagline is tight harmony, bright outlook. So like Joe, I'm looking for the bright part of the whatever we're going to find in these times.
I have a really quick story I'd love to share. That when we did our first read through of the show for Sheldon, It was a really snowy day. I remember the weather was really lousy in New York, and it was in some studio. I don't know if we were it was maybe a pre-reading. Jeff, you'll remember better than I do what it was, but we read it down for him, and he came trudging into this studio, which may have been a walk-up, like 3 or 4 flight walk-up, and he's wearing his snow boots and he's soaking wet, and he comes upstairs. I'm like, shit, you didn't take a cab? He said, no, I took the subway. This is now like 92 or 3-year old Sheldon, right? You know, and he had taken a subway, and you know, he got dried off and he sat down and he watched the show. And after it was over, I said, Sheldon, you got to let me at least walk you to the subway or get you a taxi. He said, absolutely not. Under no circumstances. He put back on the galoshes, he put back on the overcoat, put back on the hat, back on the scarf, and marched right back out and took the subway home. God love him.
Wow. Wow.
I will only add to that. I can only hope I have his memory when I'm that old, and his I'm still ambulatory like he is, and all that. That was a real thrill. He has the ears of a bat and the keenest sense of everything. He hears and sees everything. It was a thrill to work with someone like that.
Yeah,
he just celebrated his 97th birthday on Friday night, and this is all part of a celebration of that. So more power to him
for
and
55
to Marge.
years, and watched him age so brilliantly and so gracefully. There's nothing like him. He's a real treasure, that man.
We're actually meshing 2 or more productions here tonight. We have the music director of the London production of Rothschild and Sons from 2018 with us here tonight, Ben Van Tienen, who I just had the pleasure of meeting. Ben, would you fill us in on what you're up to and where you are and all of that?
Hi. I am in London in our little flat in Wandsworth, as they say in Love Actually, the dodgy end. I've been quite lucky, actually. I've done quite a lot of composing over the last year. I wrote a song cycle for the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Choir and another song cycle for the Tasmanian Symphony Orchestra, so that kept me quite happy and busy. I've also been very lucky because I'm the music director for Andrew Lloyd Webber's new Cinderella. So we've had bits and pieces to do over the year with casting, and thank you for the applause, that's very nice. We've had bits and pieces to do, you know, just when you're starting to despair, there'll be a phone call and there'll be one day of casting, and that just is enough to keep you going, you know. I have done a lot of yoga and I've drunk a lot of wine because, you know, everything in moderation. And also just over the pandemic, my partner Mark and I just got engaged. So that's really nice too. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So Ben, is Cinderella very different from Rothschilds and Sons? Not the same story? No, not the same songs. Oh, okay. Just asking.
No, I'm afraid not. Jeff. But I'll still do the same vocal warm-ups in your honor. So don't you worry.
Well, that's what we want, right? Those vocal warm-ups. Right.
Absolutely.
We also have with us tonight the choreographer from the York Theatre production in 2015, Dennis Jones. Dennis?
Hi, everyone.
And London as well. And London as well.
Oh, London, that's right. Excuse me.
And London as well,
yes,
yeah.
I wasn't in London, so thank you for filling that in.
Choreographer is a bit of an overstatement. I mean, I wouldn't describe the show as exactly a dance-driven event, but, you know, certainly...
Musical staging?
It's more of the musical staging variety, of work. But yeah, no, I can't tell you how nice it is to see all of your faces and to see those clips. What wonderful memories that brings back. I'm in New York. I have been here for most of the pandemic. And, you know, it's very encouraging to see, as I'm sure others of you who are also here, New York kind of, you know, finding its feet again and, you know, feeling the sort of the heartbeat of the city coming back to life. And the projects that I was supposed to do last year seem to now be happening tentatively in the fall of this year. So it's been nice to start having meetings and talking about casting and just actually talking about something other than what's on Netflix. So I'm hanging in there.
Representing one element of the design team of the York Theater production is Carrie Robbins, the fabulous costume designer.
You want me to tell you some embarrassing things about dressing you all? Well, you're not all here, but
maybe that's better.
Carrie, you're out of frame.
oh,
Yeah.
I know it's. Wait a minute. Let's see if I can. I actually do it. How's that?
That's better. Much better. Much better.
Much better. There we go. I think one of the really frightening moments for me, well, the first frightening moment, frankly, was to get the number of the size of the budget. That was truly horrible. But passing that, the second frightening moment was the moment that I realized that we had decided that Bob needed to dye his beard. And there was a moment where it became clear to me that he had an allergy to the dye material. And I just saw the headline, in Variety or something, that costume designer had brought this incredible talent to a raw face, because that's what happens if you have an allergy to dye. You're supposed to test it first, very tiny and on your elbow or something, but we didn't have the time. Do you remember that, Bob? Oh, yes. Well, or he would sue me, and that would really be, anyway. And the other thing I think that was equally as most of it, it's a beautiful, beautiful show. It's a pleasure to work on. The challenges, besides the budget, are covering 50 years. That is really a major thing. And you have to do it because you can't expect that. The lights can't do that. And Jim can't do it. We just can't change that much scenery. So it's my job. And I suggested at one point to Bob to help out that I could provide for him a small thickening in the stomach area, which would help him. It would, help and support him to get older, because people do get a little thicker as they get older, and that might be good. And he didn't seem to be very interested in that, and not very optimistic. And I said, well, all right. And I forget it. And he said, no, it's okay. You want me to try it? I'll try it. I think I could actually manage it without that, but if you want me to do it. And I guess we agreed that he would try it without first. And of course, it was completely humiliating because, he did it, and it's called acting, and it was perfect. And he didn't need any padding from me or anybody else. So every once in a while, but I have worked with actors who do need that help, So anyway.
Why don't we move on to Mr. Cuccioli, our Meyer Rothschild.
If I could just tag team off of something Carrie said. Yes, I if you notice in the clips, I have a very gray beard, so I had to dye it when I was playing younger Meyer, and then gray that as I got older. So I used Just for Men, which is a highly chemical, very toxic product, and my face did not like that very much, and I had severe dermatitis. And so I had to go to a dermatologist and get all that taken care of. But then it was recommended to me by another cast member who will go nameless right now, but her initials are Christine LaDuca. She suggested that I use some organic product, which was a great suggestion. So I ordered an organic product, which actually was made with blueberries. So I put the organic, when I was starting to get gray, the gray was growing out, I used this organic product on there, which worked great. It was black, it looked terrific. And then like a day or two later, I would notice that in a certain light, it'd be a little purple. and then, it would start, and so I'd put some more in, and then it would darken, and then within a day, it'd start getting purple again. And one of my favorite moments was, I didn't tell anybody about this, one of my favorite moments was when I was on stage opposite Glory Crampton, and she was looking at me in a certain light, and I'm talking to her and I'm acting with her, and she just would kind of go, and her eyes would go to my beard, and I knew exactly what she was doing, and she was seeing all the purple in my beard, and it just almost made me burst out laughing on stage. But
I will never forget that, Bob, because the lights hit it in a certain way that it was bright purple. And
right.
I couldn't remember a line. I didn't know what was happening. All I saw was your purple beard.
But I never learned. But some actors never learn, because I went to London and I decided to just skip the Just for Men and just use because I thought it was a chemical reaction with the Just for Men, and it wasn't. I went to London and I got the product. I put that in, and the same thing happened. And I had to use like a mascara every night to put it in my beard. Oh, vanity, thy name is Bob.
Oh.
So
we never knew what we were going to get with Bob's beard.
So that was a funny favorite moment.
But you have such a history with the show.
I do. I did it, as you mentioned before, I had done it, I think it was 1991-ish. We did it at the American Jewish Theater, which was underneath Gristides
I saw it.
On 20...
West 26.
Thank you. Yes. And then we were a success there. We moved to Circle in the Square downtown, which no longer exists either. And it was a wonderful production. It was Lonnie Price directed that. I ended up playing Nathan Rothschild, and I'm with two of my favorite Nathans in the world right now, Christopher Williams and Gary Trainor. And the show was always very special to me. I had a very strong connection to it back then, and it always held a very strong place in my heart. All through the years that I never did it again and never did any readings of it until Jeff Moss approached me and many years later and said, "Would you? We'd like you to play Meyer." And I was so touched and jumped at the opportunity, because it's a role that I've always wanted to play, and I remembered Mike Burston's performance so well, and such a beautiful performance, and I jumped at the chance, and I wanted to play it, and was so grateful to get to do it at the York, and so grateful to do it with Sheldon and Sherman. And some of my favorite moments were, Sheldon actually wrote 2 new pieces for the show. He wrote the music and the lyrics for both. And one of my favorite moments was when we did the first read through of it, and he sang what's to be done for me and for the rest of the cast and the creative team there. And I made sure that I taped that, and I do have that. But wow. It was a very special moment to hear him sing those lyrics, and it's something I'll hold very dear to me. One of my other favorite moments was actually getting to play this not only at the York, that was incredibly special, but to also play it in London, because London was a bucket list for me, and to actually play there and to play a show and a role that I was so close to and meant so much to me, and to bring it to a London stage with an extraordinary cast and creative team.
Let me just add, Jim, let me just add one thing to what Bob was saying. It's nothing to do with the beard, but it has to do with Sheldon. Bob, you remember when Sheldon sang those songs for you and the very first time in front of the cast, but I had the very, very fortunate experience and unique experience of going to his house for him to sing it for me for the very first time. And you all know Sheldon, and you know what he's like, and you know how exacting he is, and how he sees every detail. But this was another person. He was in the room like a young composer, so nervous and so worried if it was going to be right. It was an incredible experience to see him giving birth to his work. I'll never forget it. It just said something so much about him and where it came from. It came so deep inside of him, and he was holding on to it just as long as he could. It's just a wonderful memory of Sheldon. I don't know how old he was. Maybe he was 93, but not that moment, not that day. He was young. It was the first time. It was thrilling, just thrilling.
Yeah, when I grow up, I want to be him.
You said it.
Because when I feel like things get me down as far as the profession goes, when I feel like I'm tapped out as far as my creativity goes, honest to God, I do think of him and how much he is still at it. He's still creating. It's a constant force, and it's an engine that just will not stop. Yep. And I admire that, and I respect that so much in him.
You are so right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I have a slightly variation on the theme of Sheldon. When we were in London, we got a message that Andrew Lloyd Webber would like to meet Sheldon. They'd never met. And so Sheldon asked me and my wife if we'd like to join he and Marjorie and go meet the Webbers. So obviously I thought this is going to be a remarkable evening, and went and had the luxury of sitting in a room listening to these two titans talk about the creative process of making musicals, etc. And when it came to Rothschild and Sons, it was the same kind of feeling that all of you know. He was so proud of it, he loved it, and he never tried to take away from his respect for Gerry Bach's music. That was part of the process, even though we hadn't had the luxury of having Gerry with us, except through the estate, which gave us access to everything that resulted in one of the most remarkable moments, which is the song Glory sang in the show called It's a Map, I guess. They were talking about the process of creation, and he was bragging about how he had been able to revisit and revise and make this new version of Rothschilds and Sons happen. And it was pretty stunning.
Speaking of Just a Map, we have a recording, a video clip of that moment from the show.
Pink is for Frankfurt, lavender is London, orange is Bohemia, Copenhagen's grey. Here lies all Europe, colorful and peaceful. Wouldn't life be pleasant if it were this way? Blue, gray, orange, pink, with colored ink, they have made every country and city orderly and
gorgeous, just wonderful.
Oh, bravo,
Glory?
Glory, bravo.
Oh,
Absolutely.
making me cry, Jim. Watching that, it's just
You're making us cry.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Tell us a little about where you are and what you're up to. And
so where I am. I'm in Naples, Florida right now. I have family here, so I've been coming here for years. And so as long as New York again is shut down, this is where I am for the time being until we get running again. You know, back up and running. And I actually have worked on a really interesting project during quarantine, because in the beginning of the pandemic, I get a lot of my friends, a lot of actors, we were all talking and everybody was really feeling down because we don't have, you know, any work. We don't know when we're going to work again, and the shutdown of Broadway. So I gathered a cast of actors, dancers, singers. I gathered a full orchestra, and I produced and directed a 15-minute music video starring Bob. So Bob and I had done the musical 9 together 11 years ago. So we got this entire cast together and individually filmed everybody in quarantine. And there were 32 people, so each actor did their you know, their vocals by themselves in their homes. And so we basically wove together 32 people into a 15-minute tribute to 9, which it's really kept me busy during this entire pandemic, and it's given a lot of us, you know, all of us a focus, and all of us it's helped us stay connected with our creativity and kind of sharing our work in a new medium since we're not on a live stage. So yeah, that's been really gratifying, and a lot of time in the editing room. I learned how to edit.
Wow.
It's wonderful. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
And it premiered last night on YouTube, and it's pretty remarkable. She did an amazing job.
Yeah, it's called Project 9. And yeah, we just debuted last night, so it was real exciting, getting some great response, and it's a feel good, just like what Joe was saying and everybody's saying, and Jeffrey, that we're trying to keep ourselves buoyant and light and unstoppable until we have our normal performing venues again. So.
And then, do you have a special memory or two from the show, from Rothschild and Sons?
Well, just going back to watching Just a Map, again, I'll reiterate watching Sheldon sing that to us at that piano that day, and then telling me I was going to get to premiere his song. And I think the day we went into the recording studio and I was recording that song was just an amazing memory for me, because I got to record I'm the first person to record a Sheldon Harnick beautiful song, and I felt so honored, and that was just incredible. Some funny memories, I think I'll never forget in the beginning of the show in New York and London, when Arnold and Jeff would sit in the audience holding their breath to see if I would make this costume change, that we started the show with me at the 65 or 70-year-old Goodala, and within minutes—
They weren't the only one that was holding their breath.
I know. Within minutes, I mean, I had to run backstage, and we had a team of people that descended on me and took the hair down and changed my clothes, and I had to come right back out on stage to start the beginning of the show with Bob as the 20-year-old Goodala. So that took a lot of finagling, and I'll never forget just Arnold every night, your face. Did she make it? Are you making it? Yeah, so we finally got it right.
Glory, it didn't matter how many times you made it. I was always worried this would be the night you wouldn't. And it was, and watching Bob find ways to sort of vamp while he came upon you was really hysterical for me. By the way, just for Charles's sake, the song that Gloria is alluding to, the melody is by Gerry Bach. It was cut from the show originally, and Jeff was able to have access to the archives at Lincoln Center,
right,
and found it. And then the lyric is by Sheldon, but it had never been performed in Rothschilds or Rothschild and Sons. For whatever reasons, the musical theater gods had cut it, but then restored it to our ability to put it in the show. And it's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary song, too.
Yeah.
I would just say, Jim, one of my, just going back to the memories, just being on stage with Bob and all the sons was also just one of the most incredible memories in the show, of just having just the power and the connection and the relationship with the whole Rothschild family on stage, and how it was written and how it was written for all of us to have that kind of intense connection was just amazing.
I'll never forget when I saw Glory really become Mama Rothschild in London, when the lights were too dim and she couldn't find the eyes of her sons. And she just kept saying, I need more light. I have to see them. If I don't see them, we're not a family. If I can't see their eyes, I can't believe and trust what I'm saying to them or what they're feeling back to me. And it was right. She was right. And of course, we took the note and the lights came up. But in that moment, not only did Glory claim the relationship she had to the boys, but she claimed the right to be who she was in the cast, which was the other part of the partnership of Meyer and Goodhalla. Absolutely.
Before we get to the highlight of our show, the Dueling Nathans, I thought maybe we would hear a little bit of the opening number, the title song from the show.
Shoulders back, every head held high, for at last we're underway. Founders of the famous financial firm, Rothschild and Sons. Jaws will drop when the world finds out what a step we took today. Hagen's favorite banking house, Rothschild and Sons. Yes, you skeptical souls who sold us short. We're superior agents of the court. Twinkling high in the fiscal sky is a newly risen star. There's another firm in the firmament, Rothschild and Sons. Who stands ready to satisfy an expanding clientele. Servants of our prince and the king so far, Rothschild and Sons. Who stand home in the gilded halls where the reigning group loves dwell. Members of the firm whose initials are Rothschild and Sons. We're superior agents, court of court. International finance, right our port. Say hello to a bright new world, to a bleak one, say farewell. Who's making laws to the Copenhagen favorites? Who gave a shove and we're another Joshua. Who's making laws? Who gave a shove? Rothschild and Sons.
Well, I would certainly call that choreography.
That vocal blend, I got to tell you, that vocal blend is absolutely awesome. You five guys
Stunning.
Together, wow, what a sound, a wall of sound, just fantastic.
Jerry
Dennis
Mack,
Jones.
as a fellow director, perhaps ographer, would you care to? You didn't see the show, did you?
I did not see it, but Dennis Jones, you do. That's so good, because I know that York stage to choreograph all those people on that York stage is a challenge. Did you? Yeah. Did you have a lot of challenges doing it?
Yeah, not a lot of space. It's funny. This applies to like everything that I do, but I look at clips and immediately I'm like, oh, I would love to change that, and that. Yeah. there's a couple of things right away I was like, oh God, I wish I could do this again, and then just make some adjustments. But I also would just love to do this again because it's such an incredibly beautiful show. I was so moved seeing that. And Gloria, your song, I mean, forget it.
Here,
So
here, here, here.
Well, Dennis was there. Dennis was there. Like I choreographed Soul Doctor, this story of Shlomo Carlebach. So I don't know. I didn't know anything about the Jewish history and culture and all this stuff. So I did a lot of homework. Did you have a lot of research to do choreograph this?
I did, I mean, I did enough research just to understand a little bit more about the family and the time and place. But I wouldn't say that the movement was in any way generated via historic research at all. I mean, as you can see, it's about family, it's about pride, it's about that sort of exuberant moment of achievement, and that's it's more emotionally driven than like historically driven, I think.
And can I just say, Jeffrey Clyde, I've known you since the beginning of time.
Yeah, baby. Nice to see
God.
It's nice to see you.
Fantastic. How is it possible you get younger? It's what are you drinking the Kool-Aid? What's going on?
Oh yeah. I don't know. You look fantastic too. You look well, and it's nice to see you. We'll have to catch up.
Yes, we'll sidebar.
Yep.
So now we're to the dueling Nathans part of our evening. We have Christopher Williams from the New York Theater National Jewish Theater production, and Gerry Trainor from the London production. And of course, we have Mr. Cuccioli, who was Nathan in the 1991 production off Broadway. So 3 Nathans really here. Christopher, you want to start out and talk a little about where you are, what you're up to, and a memory or two?
Sure, yeah. Hello, everybody. This was an extraordinary time for me. I was lucky enough to be a part of the San Diego workshops as well as the New York workshops, and then eventually onto the York stage. And it had been, it was the first musical I had done in 12 years. So it was a long time ago. And I was terrified of performing with all of these amazing people. Let alone having Sheldon in the room and, all the way through all the workshops. It was truly a terrifying moment. I remember calling home a lot, just going, I don't know if I can do this. This is just insane. These people are so amazingly talented. But I was so happy, and it is one of the highlights of my life. And I thank everybody, for it. But right now, I'm back in San Diego. This is where I live. I'm at North Coast Repertory Theater, actually, where the San Diego workshop happened. Back at work. This is my office. And we have been active through the whole pandemic. We've been putting out streaming shows that we've been recording here, 1-person and 2-person casts through the unions and very, very strict health restrictions. But we've been able to produce through the entire pandemic, luckily, and giving at least some of us and some actors work throughout. And it has been great, and we've had great successes with them, and we're still continuing to do them through this until we can open for live theater. None of them have had audiences, so we've just been recording them and editing them and streaming them. So we've been lucky. But Bob, you took my story. That having Sheldon sing those songs, well, it was a historical moment for what was happening. I remember everybody's looking around the room going, "Oh my gosh, is this really happening right now?" And the energy in that room was unparalleled. Just listening to that almost that boyish kind of joy again of things that he's created, and it was just extraordinary. But other than that, seeing the evolution from the workshop, from the original workshop here, all the way through the, at least from the York production, was really great. I mean, listening to Jeffrey and Arnold and Sherman talk about how we can change these little things, and Jeffrey, bringing me into some of those moments of change and asking, opinions about what if we did this with Nathan and Meyer in this moment. Yeah, just extraordinary. It's really lovely, and it's lovely to see everybody again. It's been too long.
Gerry, give us a UK perspective on Nathan and also what
Nathan.
you're up to.
Well, I'll start with what I'm up to. It's like everyone, I suppose. It's been a quiet old year. I did a few parody songs at the start of lockdown. I did my own version of It's the End of the World as We Know It by REM. You can see that on YouTube. It's worth a watch. Also, I've been doing a bit of teaching and currently doing a little bit of courier working. You got to pay the bills some way. But when it comes to Rothschild and Sons, my overarching memory is just Jeff and Arnold just staring at us with this reverence to the piece. I had just finished playing Dewey Finn in School of Rock in the West End, and I was looking for something to get my teeth into and work with adults again, as it were. And I walked into the audition room, and Jeff, I saw the twinkle in his eye, and I was like, okay, this director likes me. And he started redirecting me, and I immediately thought this could be a very good relationship. And we had a second audition, and I very quickly realized what the piece was about. I'm a Catholic man from Northern Ireland, so I was like, boom, this is a persecution musical. I know this. We know this inherently, and just it's so powerful, Rothschilds, in that sense, because some can say that it's about money, but it's not. It's about liberation. It's about civil rights and things, and I just ate all that up. And I think my huge thing is for Arnold and Jeff. It's rare to be cradled, and I'm going to use that word, cradled by the creatives with such love in what they're doing and such investment, and not monetary investment, life investment, heart investment in what they're doing. And that just oozed through the whole process of Rothschild. And I'm sure everyone would agree with me. And, count to three and off you go. That's what we do.
Yes, but when I told the Ethel Merman story on the first day in London, I thought for such a long time, oh my God, I'm going to be in London with British actors. They know so much. Irish actors. Okay. And so I told the Ethel Merman story. Well, Ethel Merman, and she asked, how do you, your first entrance, and a voice and a hand from the back of the group went up, and someone said,
"Who's Ethel Merman?"
Right.
She didn't permeate Belfast.
And the truth is, it's interesting in the development of Rothschilds and Sons, the relationship between Nathan and Meyer is the relationship that has grown and changed. And that began to influence the relationship of Gudula and Nathan and the boys. That has always been such an interesting part of this show and the development of it, and Sheldon created a song for that. He Never Listens came out of that, and even in London, the relationship changed with change of who's singing what. In those songs, it's been a very interesting journey for you guys, all of the Nathans.
I will also say I'll always love it because it was my first ever professional award. I won the Off West End award for playing Nathan. Hopefully not my only ever professional award, but I did win it.
Bravo to all of you. Bravo to all of you.
The other tribute that I have to pay to these wonderful people, and especially my two new friends from London, is that when we had the chance to take the London version and redo it as a reading performance at Lincoln Center Library for the Performing Arts, Ben found a way to come to America to play it, and Gerry took his 1 week vacation from touring School of Rock to come to New York and spend a busman's holiday recreating the part at Lincoln Center. So to me, whether it's the pandemic or whether it's London or New York, the most remarkable aspect of my through life in over 50 years of theater has been the dedication and caring of people who make theater. It's just, it's like no other profession in the world. And I'm so hopeful that we're coming back.
I'd like to take a minute and look at some production photos from the York production, the New York production, which particularly shows off Carrie's work as the costume designer.
It's like gorgeous. The costume,
Yeah,
gorgeous.
stunning work, Carrie. Really beautiful. Charles, maybe you want to lead this discussion, but the fascinating thing about this show, the various iterations of this show, The Rothschilds was a successful Broadway show, not a runaway hit. But the fact that this show has so much to say and says it so well and has been revisited a number of times by different directors, different producers, all wanting to tell this story more clearly, I think is fascinating and says so much about the material and the people who wrote it and the people who have taken it on. I just did your work for you, Charles.
Well, you did, but I wonder if maybe Arnold and Robert and Jeff might say a few words about the different versions of it. For instance, I believe the conclusion of Rothschild Sons is quite different from the end of the original. But do any of you have anything to say about the contrast in the two versions?
Well, Rothschilds and Sons is about a family who eventually are willing to give up everything to find what everything really is. As we used to say, sometimes nothing is better than everything. It's much different than the original in that it goes on after, I mean, Meyer died in the original, but Meyer dies here, and Gudula rallies the family, and they take a stand against the oppressors, and they are willing to risk everything. Risk, they say, Mama, are you willing to risk? Yes, I'll, and Sheldon's changed the lyric for that song, we'll risk everything, because that's what we felt was important to show. That was what the family was about. It's not about bankers. It's about a family who stands together right to the end.
And I think you or we in collaboration used that as the tagline on the poster.
That's
a
right.
Family willing to risk everything.
That's right. That's right.
It was the redefinition of that family, I think, that really morphed so much throughout our productions, redefining what those relationships were and where the conflicts were and how strong they were and where they happened. And Gutula's role was strengthened, and just to make the whole family dynamic more complete. So it took a couple of iterations to really get that massaged into the right place.
Charles, I think for me, with a little bit of hindsight now, it relates to Jewish identity a great deal, and the universality of that as an oppressed people because obviously that's been true in many cultures. Gary's ability to identify it through his Irish history is not unlike what many cultures could understand about this kind of material. He called it the persecution material. But for me, it's the fact that Meyer, rather than picking up the wagon like Fiddler and moving on, stands with pride and says, I don't move. I find a way through everything that I can do with my brain and my heart and my family to make a difference and change the world for myself and others. And that core pride that is in that character that Bob portrays so brilliantly because of the empathy that Bob Cuccioli has in his acting, as well as his talent for delivering the material, becomes a symbol, I think, that an audience relates to and wants to feel that is possible in their own lives, that they don't have to hide, that they can step out and make a difference by being the best of who they are and not running away.
As Meyer says, they bow to survive sometimes. They do what they have to do to survive, to be able to do what they want to do in the end.
I want to see the fighting cease. In my own lifetime, I want to see my sons enjoy the fruits of peace. While I'm still here, beyond the current, and no one can lock us in or lock us out. We have climbed higher, much higher than I thought we would climb. It's a long journey, and even though the end's in sight, there's not much time. I want to know we haven't lived once in my own lifetime. In my own lifetime, I want to see our efforts progress. In my own lifetime, I want to see the walls come down, and then I'll rest. This Moses wants to see the promised land. In my own lifetime.
So Sherman, you were brought into the original production of The Rothschilds by Hilliard Elkins.
Yes, I was. He had gone through many writers and was unsatisfied with the results. And so I guess he was looking for a fresh point of view, and I was young, and I had won some Hallmark Prize for television drama, and he asked me to take a look at it. I read the book, saw that the first 10 pages was what interested me about the rise, living in the ghetto, and how do you get out of it. And we were going through the one of many civil rights eras, and I could see an analogy between the struggle of Black people in this country and the struggle of the Jews in Europe. And I thought this was a decent thing to work upon. And so I started working, and it came through. It came through. Now, it didn't come through exactly, though. I discovered something. It takes sometimes, you think you have finished with a musical, 40 years later, you were rewriting it. And that's what happened with Rothschild Sons. It's what happened with Sheldon and me, with Rex. We have finally gotten the version of it that we think is stage-worthy. And
where did that begin?
That began at the York Theatre, when we had a wonderful cast and
amazing
a wonderful producer in
and,
Jim Morgan.
And director Jay Binder.
Director Jay Binder, because we were able to take a deep breath, not worry about critics and nervous producers and all the things that can drive writers crazy, but all we cared about was what we were putting on stage. And I think we've got a really excellent show now, if anyone wishes to do it. But the Rothschilds really took a transition, because not only had we changed, but the world had changed. And so we found that, for example, the show was dominated by Maya Rothschild, and his wife was an ancillary character. She just had little to do. Don't do that, Maya. Oh, too bad. Don't let my children go, etc., etc. And Sheldon and I, and our director, Jay Moss, felt that we needed to give this woman something more to say. These things, even in those days, didn't happen by the man alone. And so we did several things. We built up some of her dialogue. We gave her a stronger character. We gave her a song that was removed from the show called Just a Map, I believe. And it really was an anti-war song when her sons are being sent off to war-torn Napoleonic Europe. And with the addition of a really good actress and some good lines and new songs, and we gave her more or less the ending of the show. We let Maya come in, but she had a much, much stronger presence. And I think it made for a stronger show.
And wasn't one of the spark plugs, if that's the word, of keeping this new version on the front burner, Arnold Mittelman? He's been very much a champion of it.
Oh, he has.
With Jeff Moss.
He loves the show. And, and he's trying to get productions in other places. The reality is that the issues that the show deals with exist today. I saw the news yesterday. There's a young man throwing rocks into synagogue windows. Anti-Semitism, I hate to say this because I'm Jewish, but it will never be cured. It is a chronic disease. You can keep it down, you can temper it, but it's like anti-black feeling. People sometimes are constituted to having to find someone to hate. And for many centuries, it was the Jew. And today, it's often the black person.
And then today we have the Asian.
And the Asians, my God.
Problem.
It's horrific that, I don't want to get into the whole Trumpian thing, but he is one of the people who set the tone for some of this new hatred which we have in this country. And it's appalling to me. But a show like The Rothschilds is an entertainment, but at the same time that it entertains, it has a moral lesson behind it. It is, it's important to be seen, I believe. And today, I think in this generation, there are no strangers. We're all in this together. And The Rothschilds is a wonderful introduction to that point of view. The York Theatre did something. You didn't know you were I don't want to insult you, Jim, but you didn't know that you were at a little theater. You could have been in Broadway. It had that sense of fullness, of a total kind of physical experience. The costumes were beautiful. The orchestrations were fine. And the singers were terrific. And the cast was great.
Written by Frederick Morton about the Rothschild family. I think it was called The Rothschilds. It was optioned by Hilly Elkins. He thought there was a musical in it. And then he called Gerry and me and we loved the book. We met with Fred and worked very closely with Fred in creating the musical that was based on his book. It's a wonderful book and a wonderful story. It's almost like a folk tale, but it's a wonderful story.
And then you all very successfully turned it into a musical,
we turned it into a musical. The first version of the musical was good, but then we had an opportunity to redo it, and it was done in London. And I think that the version we done in London was even better than the original version. We looked through it, and whether they were mistakes or not, I can't say, but there were places that disturbed us. We thought we can do better than that, and I think we did the second time around.
Absolutely. And there have been further changes since London, I believe. You've kept perfecting it.
Subsequent changes. And if it's done again at the York or wherever, there will probably be subsequent changes again. But that's because it's such a rich story. And the Rothschild family, the five sons and the father, they're endlessly fascinating.
Absolutely. And the new, smaller version focuses in on the family so much more than the original. The family doesn't get lost in the big spectacle of the wonderful original version.
Yeah, I think the more we do the show, the more we try and stay with the family and just make that family bring out the riches of that history. Hal Linden sang the song in the show, and I must say, he sang it beautifully as the father, as Meyer Rothschild. It was a very moving experience to hear Hal do it, and he occasionally uses it in his nightclub act because it works just as well outside of the show as inside of the show.
It's a wonderful statement. And then Bob Cuccioli did it for us in Rothschild and Sons and brought his own approach to it.
Yeah,
so
Bob Cuccioli was, I think, every bit as good as Hal, and that's saying a lot because Hal was wonderful, but Bob was wonderful too. And if we ever do it again, I would love him to do it.
Well, we all, when we were all talking the other day, everyone was in favor of trying to make the show happen again.
Really?
And we think audiences would really respond to it today.
That's lovely to hear.
So let's keep our fingers crossed.
The song Just a Map was written for the original production, and somehow it never got in there. I don't even remember whether it was put into rehearsal and then later taken out, but it never made it. And then years later, when we did Rothschild Sons, which was kind of a sequel to the Rothschilds, I said, this time, by God, it's going in. I insist. And since nobody fought me on it, we put it in.
We're very glad you did, because it's one of the highlights of the show.
It worked very nicely, and I'm very proud of that lyric. I think it's a lovely lyric.
It says so much in the wonderfully simple way that you say things that are very deep.
Thank you.
Not everyone has that ability to speak so deeply on such a level that everyone can relate to. So,
I would say no one has that ability.
I agree. Anyone else want to make a near to closing statement, Ben?
Just watching all these videos has really made me think of one of the big, maybe obvious differences between Rothschild and Sons is the orchestration of our more chamber version. You know, you can listen back to the original Broadway cast of the Rothschilds, and it's this huge, brassy, everything orchestration. And in a really impactful way, I found the chamber version of these orchestrations. We had a piano and a violin and a cello and a woodwind player, and they sort of end up becoming, I don't know, it feels like they're at the heart of the piece somehow. I'll never forget, we turned up to the Park Theatre for our first day, and I looked at the space where these musicians were going to have to play all together, and it was so small that we ended up with our woodwind player. We opened the door to the fire escape, and the woodwind player sat in the fire escape and played from there. But
that's where woodwind section should be anyway.
Absolutely. But the thing that I'll never get over, and I don't know that I'll ever replicate this on any show ever, was I remember thinking, how am I even going to hear the actors from here? You know, I was up so high and I was behind them, and I thought, I don't feel like I'll be able to even hear them, let alone accompany them, and let alone then communicate what I need to the other musicians. And what was crazy is that I sort of never ended up needing to communicate how to accompany to the other musicians, because we all just ended up listening together. I've never worked on a show where the other musicians are as engaged as me in the listening and the accompanying and the telling of the story as those other three were. It was something really special, and I realized sort of by the end of the run I was barely leading them. They were just listening, and we were just accompanying the storytelling, and it was a really beautiful thing to be a part of.
Arnold, are you the person who has kept this project going through the years, or is it you and Jeff together? I remember a production we didn't mention was the production of the Rothschilds at your theater, the Coconut Grove, that Jeff directed. I happened to design, and this was what, late 80s maybe? I don't know. Or maybe early 90s. And you all were talking then about a smaller version of this.
I would say that we're the two most determined people initially, but after Sheldon became convinced, and after the Bach estate began to embrace the project, and after Sherman Yellen began to see the opportunities that he had never had in the first production to realize his story, and even Fred Morton, who attended some of the early readings, who wrote the underlying novel, and finally came to us and said, this is the story I wanted them to tell in the first musical. I began to realize that this was going to be quite a special journey, and that the company we assembled in both places, there was something about this show and this material, and a lot of it has to do with the way Jeff creates the feeling within a company, but it has to do with the fact that people do embrace it. And what Ben just described among the musicians, my feeling was, why not? Of course. There's a remarkable human story unfolding every night among these very talented people that makes a difference in the audience, who from the moment they sit down till the moment the show ends, do not stir. The fellow at the Park Theater, not you, Jim, but the fellow at the Park Theater said, my audiences don't sit for this long. Where are you putting in the intermission? And I looked at him and I said, we're not. We don't have an intermission. And he looked at me and said, I don't know. After the first preview, he said, you're right. The audience loves it. I was a fool to even suggest it, which was good for him. So yeah, as I watch this, what comes up in me, let's figure out how to do more with this show. Let's continue to keep working on it and make it happen in other places. Absolutely.
I would just love to add that I agree with Gerry that Arnold and Jeff, you carry such passion and love for this project, and that instills itself every day in our rehearsal studios, everywhere we were. You have cradled this musical through all of our various incarnations, and I think that that's part of that family feel that you bring it, and then we all have taken it on, and yeah, thank you.
To all of those watching and those on the panel, a warm virtual hug of gratitude. Thanks to all our many special guests without whom we'd have no reason to be here. Thank you, Charles, Jerry Mack, and thanks so much to the panel, and especially to Sherman Yellen and Sheldon Harnick. Much appreciation to the entire York Theatre Company staff who all in one way or another made this event happen. pushing buttons behind the scenes, and admirably pulling the cast, actually two casts, but that's another story together, our essential creative consultant, Hans Friedrichs. And another cog in bringing these conversations to you is our artistic associate at the controls as we speak, navigating the Zoomscape, Fiona Sweeney. A special thanks to Michael Dangora for his superb editing. If you enjoyed this, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution to the York Theatre Company to help keep these programs happening. Please click on the link in the chat feature to donate. We all hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation, and now one final musical moment with the entire cast of York's Rothschild and Sons.
The Rothschild, the future, that great unknown awaits you. Mama, we'll never change.
But don't forget, neither will they.
In my own lifetime, I know the dangers that we'll face. In my own lifetime, I'll do my best to make the world a safer place. And I shall try to guarantee, beyond the doubt, that no one can lock us in or lock us out. We have climbed higher, much higher than I thought we'd climb. It's a long journey, but even though the end's in sight, there's not much time. I want to know we haven't built on sand. In my own lifetime. Boys, yes, Papa. Never forget who you are. Do you think they'll ever let us? In your own lifetime, I want to see Earth twice. In your own lifetime, when we have seen the walls come down, then we can rest. This Moses wants to see the promised land. In my own
Bravo, bravo. Thank you all very much.